Now, we heard about Michael Flynn being indicted for lying to the FBI about his phone call with the Russian ambassador. But as the House Intelligence Committee chair asked, why exactly was Michael Flynn's call being recorded? After all, it's supposed to be illegal to track Americans' domestic phone calls without a warrant. But warrantless surveillance does occur thanks to the mysterious Section 702 of the FISA Amendments Act, represented here by this super creepy rainbow eye. Section 702 allows backdoor searches, where you use the legally gathered communications of foreigners to monitor the Americans they're talking to. But that data must be incidentally collected, whatever that means. So in this case, they were recording the Russian ambassador. Legal. But someone could access that recording for the incidentally collected Michael Flynn. Concerning. And Flynn's indictment came at a very topical time because Section 702 is going to require reauthorisation this month. So what's going to replace it? There are three bills floating around. The strictest is being pushed by Rand Paul and Ron Wyden, the USA Rights Act. This limits Section 702 surveillance to investigations involving national security. It bans backdoor searches and it bans about searches. That's a loophole that allows you to search for communications about a person, not just to or from that person. Then there's the USA Liberty Act being pushed by Pat Leahy and Mike Lee. Now this one also allows Section 702 information gathering for foreign intelligence information, which could allow warrantless spying on immigrants or people with any foreign ties at all. It does limit backdoor searches a bit, and it bans about searches, but it also does allow spooks to do whatever they like with your metadata. Finally, there's Richard Burr's FISA Amendments Reauthorisation Act. Now, this one is not good. It allows Section 702 information gathering for investigations involving death, kidnapping, bodily injury, critical infrastructure, cybersecurity, transnational crime, human trafficking, which, by the way, is broader than it sounds, and offences against minors. In other words, just about anything. It will allow about searches, it will allow backdoor searches, it will allow all kinds of stuff. This is an artist's impression of what it looks like.
Beautiful, isn't it?
This is wrong.
I've got to find this man, Lucius.
At what cost?
Dramatic. Well, let's talk to the Batman of civil liberties, national security journalist Marcy Wheeler. She knows so much about surveillance, I'm surprised she's not locked up in Gitmo. Marcy, what are some of the major abuses that occur under Section 702 right now that you feel need to be fixed up by any reauthorisation?
The first of those is what we call backdoor searches. So, for example, if I'm talking to somebody who's targeted, and then a year down the road, the FBI gets a tip that I am taking pictures of a bridge in a suspicious way. They'll do a search and they'll say, well, she was talking to somebody suspicious a year ago, so we should open an investigation in her. It means that the FBI can basically do warrantless searches on Americans, and otherwise those would not be permitted. Another thing, it is believed this is used to collect off of VPNs and Tor exit nodes. And they do it because so many terrorists and spies and what have you use these location hiding tools to communicate with the United States. Assume that means people all over the world are having their communications and their actions reviewed by the US government.
So if they're potentially spying on people who use Tor or VPNs, that includes, well, a lot of people, but it also includes journalists who deal with leakers, because that's the tool they use to protect leakers.
Right, and so they're going after the tools that, yes, are used by criminals, but are also used by people who are engaged in at least normatively acceptable activities, but whose activities will get a lot more scrutiny by the government.
Do any of the Section 702 reauthorisation bills on the table actually address any of these privacy concerns adequately?
The Wyden-Paul bill, I think, fixes just about everything we know that's problematic from both an American standpoint and I think also from an international kind of broadened spying standpoint.
Richard Burr's bill, the FISA Amendments Reauthorisation Act, it seems to allow warrantless searches on, amongst other things, investigations involving bodily harm, cybersecurity violations, transnational crime, anything related to national security. Seems very broad.
The really scary part of that language is the introduction, where it says the data can be used for, and you talked about 8 crimes, but also anything related to the national security. And the Attorney General gets to decide what's related to the national security, and it's not reviewable by any court. So, for example, we know that the government uses these backdoor searches to find informants. And what they often do is find something embarrassing related to somebody in a community that they may want to target, whether it's Chinese scientists or young Muslim men. And they find this embarrassing thing, and they use it to coerce this person to be an FBI informant, and that is one of the main sources, or one of the known sources for the growing number of spies that the FBI and other law enforcement agencies have here in the United States.
Now, defenders of looser surveillance laws would probably say that by forcing the government to get warrants to access all these communications, you're going to thwart attempts to stop terrorist attacks. What would you say to that?
In our country, at least, a lot of the gun violence is carried out, whether by Muslim or by Christian white guy. It's often carried out by people who have a history of domestic violence. So you could argue that we would be better off shutting down 702 and focusing instead on people who have domestic violence problems and trying to find out whether they're going to engage in mass killing. It's probably a better indicator of who is the problem. But remember, it's not just terrorists that they use this for. There have been some scientists who have been targeted under FISA, and all they were doing was having the kind of conversation that scientists have all the time. Because the FBI didn't understand what they were looking at, they charged the person and then were really embarrassed when they discovered that it had nothing to do with espionage. So that I think is part of the big concern.
Marcy, what don't we know about this topic area that would really scare us if we did know?
The kinds of things they collect. I often have to remind people that PRISM, which is, you go to Google and you say, give me everything associated with this email address. When you think about it, that's not just your email. It's the cookies that are associated with you by Google search. So that means they're going to get all your searches. It's the storage you use on Google services. It's your calendar. It's your Google Maps searches. And so if you think, American tech companies collect far too much data. They analyze far too much data. Any one of the functions that Facebook or Google, or any of the other ones, but Facebook and Google especially, any of the functions that you are uncomfortable with them having, assume the government is also exploiting.
Finally, Marcy, we've been talking about domestic spying, but there's far less restrictions, of course, on foreign spying. So let's say you get the best possible version of your bill, tough restrictions on domestic spying, etc. Now, America has information sharing agreements with countries like Australia and Britain, etc. So can't we spy on Americans for you, and you spy on Australians for us, and then our governments just share the information with each other?
That is a concern, and that has been known to happen historically. But because of the way our communication networks are structured right now, our data is going to flow around the world. It just is, right? So it may be that an email that I send from, I'm in LA right now. If I send from LA to home, maybe that's going to go through Canada or Mexico or someplace else where the government can spy on it without a warrant at all. But it means that your data exists in a place where it's protected here in the United States, but also in a place where it doesn't have those protections, maybe in Hong Kong. And I think that means, and then, frankly, the NSA, CIA, all of these government agencies are doing a lot more hacking. And so, for example, if I was in Australia earlier this year, if when I was in Australia they decided they wanted to spy on me, they could just hack my computer, and that they legally are supposed to stop hacking me when I get back in the United States if it's done under the You're Traveling Overseas Authority. But those implants don't always come off the computer. So, I think, and that stuff is just simply not policed anywhere near as closely as the 702 stuff. So that's the real concern I have, is that there are ways they can get the data in places that are far less protected than under 702, and there's just not enough protection on 702.
Well, on that cheery note, Marcy Wheeler, thanks for visiting Planet America.
Sorry to depress everyone.